Let's go to the next part here, as you said. Major election in Slovakia. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. The former prime minister, how do we say it again, Krystal?
Fico.
Fico. All right, Slovakians, we're trying our best here. I'm assuming it's also not Robert. It's probably like Robert or something like that. But anyway, Robert Fico has won the Slovakian election with an anti-Ukraine stance. Critically, he is the former actual prime minister of the country. Now he has to set and try and form a coalition, but he absolutely blew out the pro-EU, pro-Ukraine party. He won 23% of the vote, actually surpassing what the last exit polls in Slovakia were. The Liberal Party, the pro-EU party, was only able to gain 18%. But when you look at the coalitional results, it's very much on the side of what he has been saying. Now, Mr. Fico is far more of an anti-Ukraine politician than anybody who currently exists in Europe. So just to give people a taste of some of the things that he has said and has asked for in the past, he says no NATO membership for Ukraine. Remember, Slovakia is a member of NATO, and remember also that NATO accession requires the unanimous consent of every single member inside of the alliance. Also, he is in the European Union. The European Union right now is trying to put Ukraine on fast track for actual entrance into the bloc. This would easily allow him in order to join with Hungary and to block that with 2 members. This is also what he has said in the past, Krystal, is he's like, not only do I not want to send aid to Ukraine, I don't want to even allow Slovakian territory to be allowed to transship aid to Ukraine. Of course, he's being blamed as a pro-Russian and all of that, but it's complicated because I was looking back at some exit polling from just a couple of months ago in Slovakia. Like half of the Slovakians are like, no, it's Ukraine's fault. They're full of Nazis. And you're like, wait, hold on, what? And it's like, well, this is a former country with deep ties to Russia. They consume a lot of Russian media. You know, it's like one of those where culturally it's actually very split. It's probably difficult for us in the West to really comprehend. But the point is that the Populist Party, who is explicitly run on an anti-Ukraine stance, also focusing on the economic cost, and it harkens back to some of the protests which we covered here on this show maybe more than a year ago now. At this point, the Slovakian public is very fed up. And don't forget this, there are elections happening right now in Poland. One of the reasons why Polish politicians changed their tune and started calling Zelensky out for basically calling him anti-Russian for protecting their own grain markets was because the right-wing party in Poland, which is against Ukraine aid, is surging in the polls there, and the pro-EU, pro-Ukraine consensus is very much under attack. So remember, this is the Eastern Bloc countries. You know, it's not necessarily the former Baltic states, and a big split in NATO will come if this man becomes the next prime minister. I mean, if he straight up is like, you know, is able to block unanimous decisions, I question whether Sweden and Finland would have even been allowed in the NATO alliance if this man had been the prime minister. So this could significantly change what a lot of the future looks like with respect to Ukraine.
I think the one thing we can say really clearly here is that this is just a pretty clear warning sign.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of question marks. As you mentioned, he is a 2-time former prime minister. And when he was prime minister, even though his rhetoric was very blustery, he ended up governing as more of a pragmatist than a firebrand, even though the rhetoric was very firebrandish. But, you know, from based on what I was reading, he's a very interesting character. He's become sort of more radical in the time that he spent outside of office. And by the way, the reason he got ousted from office was over a lot of questions about corruption. So he's now made his comeback. In terms of his politics, I mean, he started as a communist under the old, you know, Soviet regime. And then he has been on the left until he's made this sort of like transformation into a very Orban-like figure. So he's anti-immigrant. He is, you know, I think it's accurate to say he's pro-Russia. But he also, on economics, is very much in favor of like social safety net, welfare type programs. So there's not really an American politician who kind of exactly fits the mold of what he does. The other thing that's really interesting to keep in mind here is that sort of like the way that our industrial Midwest has been decimated under neoliberalism, and you've seen this shift to the right over cultural issues and also over dissatisfaction with the direction of the Democratic Party in the industrial Midwest. You have a lot of people in places like Slovakia that did better under communism and have not done well under this new, like, you know, market-based neoliberal whatever. And so there's a lot of nostalgia in a certain sense for that era, and there's a lot of, like you said, cultural ties and affinity for, the way things were. And so it's a complicated cultural portrait is all I'm trying to say here. And he's a very different politician than exactly what we have a mold for here. I think internationally, Orban is probably the closest comparison. There's also real questions over whether or not he's going to be able to form a coalition. One of the parties that was a likely candidate to be in the coalition, this sort of like far-right ultra-nationalist party, they failed to garner enough of the vote in order to get a single seat. So he can't rely on them as part of a coalition. That complicates his path to be able to form this government. So like I said, there's still a lot of question marks here in terms of whether he will actually be prime minister and how he would govern if he is prime minister, if he will be as hardline as his rhetoric has been. But I think the one thing that is pretty clear is this is a warning sign, and this plays into the picture of why there are some desperate moves happening among other NATO allies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Krystal.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.